Hello there, I'm Karim Zachary and you're watching All 24 News World News Program, broadcasting to you live from the capital Algiers. Up next are the headlines. The Zionist occupation has launched intense raids in southern Lebanon, with ongoing attacks in Gaza, violating again the ceasefire, with escalations continuing in the occupied West Bank. Next, in Syria, a ceasefire has been reached in Aleppo through international mediation. The Syrian army is on high alert after detecting SDF troop builds up east of the city, and the death toll raises above 20 as the last SDF group moves north. Also in our news, in Iran, dozens of security and police forces have been killed and wounded amid nationwide protest. President Pezeshkian accuses the Zionist occupation of fueling the unrest, while Tehran threatens strikes on U.S. bases in the region. And later on in Sudan, 4 medical personnel were killed in a rapid support forces bombing of hospitals in Dilling. Government operations resume in Khartoum, while the United Nations warns of worsening famine and food shortages. The details are right up. Welcome back to the details. It's great to have you with us tonight. First up in our news, on Sunday, Zionist occupation forces launched over 25 airstrikes across southern Lebanon. According to the Lebanese National News Agency, some of the hardest hit areas included Mahmoudiyya and Damashqiya, with renewed attacks reported in Jabour, Katradi, and Mahmoudiyya in the Jazin region. The strikes have intensified tensions in the area, raising concerns over the ongoing instability along the southern border. Elsewhere in the Middle East, 4 Palestinians were killed by Zionist forces in the Gaza Strip, marking a continued violation of the ceasefire. Palestinian media report that 3 were shot in the Zaytun neighborhood of Gaza City and in Bani Suhaila, Khan Yunis, while another succumbed to wounds sustained the previous day in the Maghazi refugee camp. The deaths came as occupation forces carried out intense airstrikes in eastern Rafah, Khan Yunis, and the Bureij refugee camp, alongside heavy artillery shelling in northeastern Gaza.
The martyr had been imprisoned and had been released less than 2 months ago. Praise be to God, he went out to check on his house, to collect wood to light a fire, and that's when we learned of his death. Praise be to God, every day houses are destroyed, every day there are shootings, and it's random that genocide continues. Do not listen to those who say it's over. It has only stopped for the Zionists, but for us it continues.
Meanwhile, a Shifa hospital in Gaza City has announced the death of a 2-month-old infant caused by extreme cold and the ongoing blockade that has prevented sufficient aid from reaching the besieged Gaza Strip. Medical sources confirm the baby's death comes amid severe winter conditions, while food, medicine, and heating supplies remain blocked. For its part, the UN Relief and Works Agency UNRWA says children in Gaza continue to live in dire conditions and urgently need warmth, nutrition, and security. The Palestinian Prisoners Affairs Commission and Prisoners Club report the death of Abdul Hadi Hussein Adwan from Gaza in Zionist prisons. He is among over 100 Palestinians who have died since the start of the ongoing genocidal war, including 51 from Gaza. Meanwhile, the Palestinian Ministry of Health says an elderly man, Jabari, was shot dead by occupation forces in Al Khalil, with ambulances reportedly blocked. Occupation forces also carried out raids across the West Bank, arresting 19 Palestinians in Bethlehem, Nablus, Baitunia, Tulkarm, Ramallah, and Jenin, including previously released prisoners. The commander of the so-called SDF, Mazloum Abdi, announced a ceasefire in Aleppo through international mediation. The agreement allows for the safe evacuation of the group's dead and wounded, as well as civilians trapped in the Ashrafiyah and Sheikh Maqsoud neighborhoods to northern and eastern Syria. Meanwhile, clashes between the Syrian army and the SDF have claimed 24 lives. The Aleppo Health Directorate reports that 129 people have been injured since last Tuesday, many from attacks on residential areas. And on Sunday, the Syrian army declared a state of alert after detecting military buildups by the so-called Syrian Democratic Forces in eastern Aleppo. The Syrian Arab News Agency reports that SDF has been bringing in armed groups along with medium and heavy equipment to the Deir Hafer front. In response, the army has mobilized its forces and reinforced deployment lines across eastern Aleppo. The Syrian Interior Ministry announced the departure of the last SDF fighters from the Sheikh Maqsoud neighborhood in Aleppo, heading toward northeastern Syria. Many fighters reportedly defected or surrendered, while others moved east of the Euphrates. The Syrian army handed control of the area to internal security forces as part of efforts to restore sovereignty and unify the region. Meanwhile, engineering teams dismantled numerous IEDs plants by the SDF in homes, public buildings, and vehicles, ensuring civilian safety as the neighborhood returns to normalcy. And speaking of normalcy, residents in Aleppo, Syria started resuming their daily lives. For more on this report, let's follow Zahra Frajani in this report again.
Aerial footage shows life slowly returning to normal in Aleppo's Ashrafiyah district. Calm appears to have settled over the area, with daily activity resuming. On the ground, despite heavy rain and freezing temperatures, residents are back on the streets and shops are gradually reopening.
Thank God people are starting to reopen their shops and resume their activities. Residents have returned to their homes. Life is coming back and we hope things will continue to improve.
Since Saturday, fighters from Syrian Democratic Forces have been withdrawing from Aleppo aboard specially arranged buses under police escort. The move marks the SDF's pullout from their remaining positions in Aleppo, Syria's second largest city. The final SDF fighters left the city on Sunday, bringing relief to residents who are now returning home after fleeing the fighting.
We are free of the SDF, their problems and their daily challenge. The army has completely cleared Sheikh Maqsoud and Ashrafiyah. This is a great joy for Aleppo. May Aleppo regain its life.
After a week of clashes, Syrian government forces regained control of Aleppo's neighborhoods following the collapse of a temporary ceasefire. The fighting displaced more than 140,000 people in just 1 week.
Elsewhere in the Middle East, Iranian state media has reported dozens of security and police personnel killed amid nationwide protests. Tasnim news agency says 109 security forces have died, including 30 in Isfahan province, while police special forces confirmed 8 deaths last Thursday and Friday. The Revolutionary Guard accused the so-called terrorist groups of attacking military bases, setting fires, and targeting vital facilities. Iranian officials also claimed the unrest is linked to the US and the Zionist entity, vowing firm action against those they say are conspiring against the nation.
As for the police, we consider this level of protest to amount to rioting, and there will be a firm, swift and decisive response. Those involved should also understand that they are being used as expendable tools. They have turned our children and youth into victims of their own deaths, and in the same way they have driven many of our people to their deaths.
In the same context, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has accused the United States and the Zionist entity of fueling the unrest in Iran, calling recent protests riots orchestrated to destabilize the country. Speaking to state media, Pezeshkian urged Iranians to distance themselves from what he described as rioters and terrorists taking orders from abroad. He also emphasized that the country's top authorities are ready to listen to the people's economic and social concerns.
We are determined and have resolved to address the country's economic problems through all legitimate and available means. If any citizen expresses grievances, we will listen and give their demands the attention they deserve. However, certain external powers, primarily the United States and Israel, are providing guidance and support to some groups with the aim of destabilizing the country. The same entities that have harmed us and targeted our youth and children are now issuing orders and inciting these individuals towards sabotage and chaos. Groups have been trained both inside and outside the country, and extremist elements have been brought in from abroad to carry out systematic acts of destruction, including attacks on public institutions, mosques and family homes. I urge you not to allow your children to join these extremist groups. These organizations do not represent the people's demands, nor do they seek to reform. Rather, they aim to create chaos and harm the country and the future of its youth.
On a similar note, Bloomberg News reports citing a White House official that the U.S. President Donald Trump is seriously considering authorizing a military strike on Iran. The official said Trump has been briefed on a range of options, including potential attacks on civilian sites. Meanwhile, the Wall Street Journal reports that Trump is set to receive a detailed briefing next Tuesday on specific measures in response to the ongoing protests in Iran. Iranian Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf has vowed that U.S. and Zionist bases in the region would be considered legitimate targets if America attacks Iran. In a Sunday press statement, Ghalibaf said Iran views the United States and the Zionist occupation as one and the same in this conflict, adding that the U.S. president has openly backed what he called a terrorist war against the country.
I
also have a piece of advice for the delusional US president. Be aware that the advice you are receiving about attacking Iran is the same advice that once told you Assad will fall. Therefore, so you do not miscalculate, know that if an attack is launched against Iran, the occupied territories and US military bases in the region will be legitimate targets for us.
And in other news, the Sudanese Doctors Network reports 4 medical personnel killed and 3 wounded in a rapid support forces attack on hospitals in Dilling. The military hospital, the main health insurance center, and Dilling Teaching Hospital were all put out of service. The network held the RSF fully responsible, calling the attacks a violation of international humanitarian law and urged the international community to protect health facilities, allow humanitarian aid, and hold those responsible accountable. Meanwhile, Sudan's government has resumed work in Khartoum, but fighting continues along the borders. The army advanced in El Obeid and South Blue Nile, yet the conflict persists, as the United Nations warns that 21 million Sudanese face severe famine. Here's Yassine Rekti with the report.
Sudan's devastating conflict has now reached its 1,000th day, with government officials accusing external parties of orchestrating a criminal conspiracy to prolong the fighting. Meanwhile, the humanitarian toll continues to mount as millions face hunger and displacement. In Khartoum, officials claim foreign powers are funding and directing paramilitary forces, including the Rapid Support Forces, to destabilize the country. Culture, Information and Tourism Minister Khalid Al-Aysir said the army's destruction of 240 RSF combat vehicles shows the group is acting on an organized plan rather than independently.
We have returned today. The government help has returned in full force to Khartoum, the capital of the two Niles. In these exceptional circumstances that the country is going through, we will be victorious, God willing. But I say to you, and with you, that this year, God willing, is the year of peace. 2026 is the year of peace.
Al-Aysir stressed that the evidence points to foreign financing supplies and management of militias targeting civilians and weakening the state. The accusations come as UN agencies warn of the world's largest hunger and displacement crisis. According to OCHA, 9.3 million people are internally displaced, over 4.3 million have fled abroad, and more than 21 million face severe food insecurity.
Today marks 1,000 days since the start of the war in Sudan. Nearly 34 million people need humanitarian support, and the scale of suffering is staggering.
Despite the humanitarian catastrophe, Sudan's army reported new gains on the battlefield. Forces seized the Kulaib area in North Kordofan, freeing dozens of civilians, mainly women and children, and pushing RSF fighters back. Air defenses shot down a drone over Al Obeid, and operations across Kordofan and Darfur destroyed vehicles and inflicted heavy losses on RSF fighters. Still, Khartoum's residents face persistent dangers, including unexploded ordnance, as the conflict rages across multiple fronts. The 1,000-day mark is a reminder that peace in Sudan remains elusive, with civilians paying the highest price.
Back home, Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune has ordered the regularization of young Algerians abroad in vulnerable or undocumented situations. The move applies to those with minor offenses but excludes violent criminals, drug or arms traffickers, and anyone collaborating with foreign services. The process will be handled by Algerian consulates, with beneficiaries required to wait for official repatriation. Officials say many of these young people were misled or exploited, and the measure aims to protect them while safeguarding the country's reputation.
The President of the Republic issued an appeal to Algerian youth abroad who are in vulnerable and irregular situations, saying they were deliberately led into error by individuals who mistakenly believed they could undermine the state's credibility by exploiting them abroad against their own country.
Still, with the activities of the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, he has extended his congratulations to the Algerian people on the occasion of the Amazigh New Year, Yenair. In a message posted on his X account, the President of the Republic wished all Algerians, both inside and outside the country, a year of pride and success. He expressed hopes that Algeria remains victorious and proud every year, closing his message with the traditional greeting, Esagas Amagas. The Algerian community in France celebrated the Amazigh New Year, Yenair, reaffirming ties to their homeland and promoting unity among expatriates. In Alès, associations and civil society groups, together with the Algerian consulate in Montpellier, organized a special event. The celebration included exhibitions of photographs, traditional jewelry and clothing, and Algerian dishes and sweets, attracting a large turnout from the local community.
We were honored today to receive an invitation from Mr. Consul on the occasion of the celebration of our happy Amazigh New Year. On this occasion, we wish you all goodness, happiness and well-being, especially for our country and the Algerian people. We share with you the joy of this celebration and say to everyone, Happy Yenair, and may you be well every year, God willing. I came with my mother and sister to celebrate the Yenair. I wish peace and happiness to our country.
Je souhaite la paix et le bonheur à notre pays.
Moving on to another news story, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has reiterated Beijing's rejection of any separatist attempts in Somalia, reaffirming support for the country's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Meanwhile, in Mogadishu, hundreds of residents gathered at Unknown Soldier Monument Square to protest what they describe as threats to Somalia's unity, chanting slogans in defense of the nation's territorial integrity. The African Union has reaffirmed its firm stance on Africa's colonial-era borders. Speaking to China Media Group in Addis Ababa, AU Commissioner Chair Mahmoud Ali Yusuf emphasized the bloc's rejection of secessionist movements, highlighting the importance of upholding the territorial integrity of the Federal Republic of Somalia and maintaining stability across the continent.
I think Chinese border, are also as sacred as the African countries' borders. That's why we believe in one China principle, because we don't support the idea of secessionists, regions, and most recently, Somaliland was one of the most recent cases in the African continent. We believe that in supporting the one China principle, we are helping ourselves on the continent. Because we are faced with the same challenge on this continent.
To other news on the Russia-Ukraine war, Russian authorities in the Voronezh region report that a woman was killed and 3 others injured in a nighttime drone attack on the city, reportedly carried out by Ukraine. Voronezh Governor Alexander Gosev said the strike damaged over 10 residential buildings, a school, and an administrative facility. The city lies roughly 250 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. Moving on now to other topical developments. U.S. President Donald Trump has warned Cuba to make a deal before it's too late or face unspecified consequences, saying no more Venezuelan oil or money will flow to the island. Posting on Truth Social, Trump said Havana's long reliance on Venezuelan support is ending and urged Cuban leaders to negotiate with Washington, though he did not specify the terms of any potential agreement.
Cuba lived for many years on a large amount of oil and money from Venezuela. Venezuela now has the United States of America. There will be no more oil or money going to Cuba. Zero. I strongly suggest they make a deal before it is too late.
For his part, Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel has rejected U.S. threats, saying Cuba will not bow to Washington and is ready to defend its territory. Speaking on X, he cited over 6 decades of U.S. sanctions and defended Cuba's sovereign right to choose its political path. Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez, for his part, also stressed Cuba's right to import fuel without U.S. interference, condemning Washington's policies as a threat to the island and regional stability.
Cuba is a free, independent and sovereign nation. No one dictates what we should do. Cuba does not attack. It has been attacked by the US for 66 years and does not threaten, but prepares, ready to defend the homeland to the last drop of blood. They have no moral authority to criticize Cuba in anything, absolutely anything, especially those who turn everything into business, even human lives.
And all these tensions come 1 week after the U.S. military operation in Venezuela. The political crisis is continuing to escalate while government supporters mobilize in Caracas to demand the release of President Nicolas Maduro and his wife. New statements from his son and the ruling party leadership seek to reinforce a message of unity and resistance. Karim Musfawi tells us more.
More than a week after a U.S. military operation led to the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores, the crisis in Venezuela shows no sign of calming. Maduro and Flores were taken into U.S. custody and flown to New York, where they face federal charges. On Saturday, the son of Maduro, lawmaker Nicolas Maduro Guerra, says his father and wife are in good condition.
The lawyers told us he's strong. We're not sad, my father said. Don't be sad, we're fine, we're fighters. Nicolas said, I'm a fighter. We will preserve life, power and the revolution. And it is up to us to move forward to keep democracy alive and continue on Chavez's path.
Back home, attention has turned to Delcy Rodriguez, Venezuela's acting president. She called for unity among Venezuelans and urged resistance to foreign intervention.
The Caribbean Sea must be a territory of peace. From here, we will not stop condemning the criminal aggression against the Venezuelan people that occurred in the early morning of January 3rd, 2026. In defense of our homeland's peace, we are uniting all Venezuelans to reject the violent and criminal attack of January 3rd.
On the street of major cities, hundreds of Chavistas have continued demonstrations demanding the release of Maduro and his wife.
After a week of this terrible situation that we have lived in our country, the Venezuelan people is united, fierce, brave people, a people with the lineage of Bolivar, of Zamora, and of our commander Chavez. We await the prompt release of our president Nicolas Maduro and his wife Celia Flores.
As Venezuelan, we have to stand up and not abandon our cause. Our oil belongs to Venezuela. It belongs to Venezuela, not to any foreign country.
The U.S. State Department has urged American citizens in Venezuela to leave the country immediately, warning of a volatile security situation. With Maduro and Flores in U.S. custody, street protests growing and diplomatic tensions spiking, Venezuela faces unpredictable fate ahead.
On a related note, U.S. President Donald Trump has issued an executive order declaring a national emergency to protect Venezuelan oil sales and future revenues, while imposing strict controls on financial flows. The White House said the move is intended to safeguard funds held in U.S. Treasury accounts from creditor claims, prevent their use in legal disputes or debt settlements, and ensure these resources remain under Washington's direct control.
President Donald Trump issued an executive order declaring a national emergency aimed at protecting future Venezuelan oil sales and their revenues and ensuring that these funds are preserved to support U.S. foreign policy objectives. Through this order, we affirm that these funds constitute sovereign property of Venezuela as long as they are held by the United States for governmental and diplomatic purposes. Accordingly, they are fully protected and not subject to claims by private entities in order to ensure that these resources are used in a way that serves strategic interests and the aspirations of the Venezuelan people.
For his part, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says Washington may lift additional sanctions on Venezuela as soon as next week to help restart oil sales and support economic recovery. He told Reuters that nearly $5 billion in Venezuela's frozen IMF special drawing rights could be deployed to aid rebuilding, and he plans talks with the IMF and World Bank on re-engagement. The move is part of broader efforts to stabilize Venezuela's oil sector and encourage U.S. companies to return. Meanwhile, in the streets of New York, rain didn't stop crowds from gathering outside the ICE office to protest federal immigration enforcement after the fatal shooting of 37-year-old Renee Nicole Good by a U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement agent in Minneapolis. The incident has ignited anger across the country, a renewed scrutiny of ICE tactics. Here's Salman Asivna.
Our grim reality.
Nicole Good, a 37-year-old woman, a poet, mother of three, and U.S. citizen, was killed during a large immigration enforcement operation in South Minneapolis on January 7th. Federal officials have said the agent acted in self-defense during the operation, but video footage and local leaders have raised questions about the use of force.
The homicide that was perpetrated on her by ICE, by a federal agent of ICE, that stands as a threat to all of us. I feel compelled to be out here standing up for her, standing up for us.
Although many of the demonstrations have been peaceful, arrests have taken place, reflecting deep tensions over how immigration enforcement is carried out, especially amid broader political debates on immigration policy and civil rights.
You're not behaving legally, you're not behaving morally, you're not doing police work the way it's supposed to be done, you're not protecting the citizens, you're creating more problems and chaos.
Immigration and Customs Enforcement was created in 2003 after the 9/11 attacks to enforce federal immigration laws. Over the years, it has faced criticism for controversial practices, including prolonged detention and aggressive deportation actions, criticisms that have grown louder in recent days after Good's death. As protests continue, lawmakers debate immigration policy nationwide. The killing of Renee Nicole Good has become a focal point in the ongoing discussion information about enforcement practices, civil liberties, and how the US balances security with the rights of individuals and communities.
And finally, it is time to catch up on more international news stories in the News in Brief with Sofiane Kentouri. Let's follow.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Russia launched over 1,100 drones in a week, along with guided bombs and missiles targeting energy infrastructure and residential areas. Meanwhile, Russian Defense Ministry announced its forces has seized Belorussia in Zaporizhia region and carried out strikes on Ukrainian military, industrial and energy facilities. Somalia's capital, Mogadishu, witnessed a mass protest on Sunday against what was described as the Zionist entity's violation of the sovereignty and unity of the Federal Republic of Somalia. Hundreds of residents gathered at the capital, chanting slogans rejecting any infringement on Somalia's sovereignty and stressing that its territory is indivisible. The BRICS joint maritime exercise involving China, Russia and South Africa officially opened in the waters and airspace of Simonstown, South Africa. The 8-day trail, titled Will for Peace 2026, runs from Friday through January 16th and includes counter-terrorism operations, search and rescue missions, and anti-sea strike exercises. Additional activities feature professional exchanges and on-board visits. Benin voted in parliamentary and local elections widely seen as test of political stability, just a month after authorities said they had foiled an attempt coup. The vote marks the country's first nationwide poll since the alleged December 7th plot and comes as allies of President Patrice Talon seeks to consolidate their dominance in parliament ahead of the presidential election in April, in which Talon is constitutionally barred from running.
And that would be all for tonight's news. To catch up on anything you missed or get the latest updates, head over to our social media channels or our website. From all of us here at All 24 News, I'm Karim Zachary. Thanks for watching and do take care.